Chapter 1 of The Blockade Runners by Jules Verne. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 1. The Dolphin. The Clyde was the first river whose waters were lashed into foam by a steamboat. It was in 1812 when the steamer called the Comet ran between Glasgow and Greenock at the speed of 6 miles an hour. Since that time, more than 1 million of steamers or packet boats have plied this Scotch river, and the inhabitants of Glasgow must be as familiar as any other people with the wonders of steam navigation. However, on the 3rd of December, 1862, an immense crowd, composed of shipowners, merchants, manufacturers, workmen, sailors, women, and children, thronged the muddy streets of Glasgow, all going in the direction of Kelvin Dock, the large shipbuilding premises belonging to Messrs. Todd and MacGregor. This last name especially proves that the descendants of the famous Highlanders have become manufacturers, and that they have made workmen of all the vassals of the old clan chieftains. Kelvin Dock is situated a few minutes' walk from the town, on the right bank of the Clyde. Soon the immense timber yards were thronged with spectators. Not a part of the quay, not a wall of the wharf, not a factory roof showed an unoccupied place. The river itself was covered with craft of all descriptions, and the heights of Govan, on the left bank, swarmed with spectators. There was, however, nothing extraordinary in the event about to take place. It was nothing but the launching of a ship, and this was an everyday affair with the people of Glasgow. Had the Dolphin, then, for that was the name of the ship built by Messrs. Todd and MacGregor, some special peculiarity? To tell the truth, it had none. It was a large ship, about 1,500 tons, in which everything combined to obtain superior speed. Her engines, of 500 horsepower, were from the workshops of Lancefield Forge. They worked 2 screws, one on either side the stern-post, completely independent of each other. As for the depth of water the Dolphin would draw, it must be very inconsiderable. Connoisseurs were not deceived, and they concluded rightly that this ship was destined for shallow straits. But all these particulars could not in any way justify the eagerness of the people. Taken altogether, the Dolphin was nothing more or less than an ordinary ship. Would her launching present some mechanical difficulty to be overcome? Not any more than usual. The Clyde had received many a ship of heavier tonnage, and the launching of the Dolphin would take place in the usual manner. In fact, when the water was calm, the moment the ebb tide set in, the workmen began to operate. Their mallets kept perfect time falling on the wedges meant to raise the ship's keel. Soon a shudder ran through the whole of her massive structure. Although she had only been slightly raised, one could see that she shook, and then gradually began to glide down the well-greased wedges, and in a few moments she plunged into the Clyde. Her stern struck the muddy bed of the river, then she raised herself on top of a gigantic wave, and, carried forward by her start, would have been dashed against the quay of the Govan timber yards if her anchors had not restrained her. The launch had been perfectly successful. The Dolphin swayed quietly on the waters of the Clyde. All the spectators clapped their hands when she took possession of her natural element, and loud hurrahs arose from either bank. But wherefore these cries and this applause? Undoubtedly the most eager of the spectators would have been at a loss to explain the reason of his enthusiasm. What was the cause, then, of the lively interest excited by this ship? Simply the mystery which shrouded her destination. It was not known to what kind of commerce she was to be appropriated, and in questioning different groups, the diversity of opinion on this important subject was indeed astonishing. However, the best informed, or at least those who pretended to be so, agreed in saying that the steamer was going to take part in the terrible war which was then ravaging the United States of America. But more than this they did not know, and whether the Dolphin was a privateer, a transport ship, or an addition to the Federal Marine was what no one could tell.
"Hurrah!"
cried one, affirming that the Dolphin had been built for the Southern States.
"Hip, hip, hip!"
cried another, swearing that never had a faster boat crossed to the American coasts. Thus its destination was unknown, and in order to obtain any reliable information one must be an intimate friend, or at any rate an acquaintance, of Vincent Playfair and Company, of Glasgow. A rich, powerful, intelligent house of business was that of Vincent Playfair and Company, in a social sense an old and honorable family, descended from those tobacco lords who built the finest quarters of the town. These clever merchants, by an act of the Union, had founded the first Glasgow warehouse for dealing in tobacco from Virginia and Maryland. Immense fortunes were realized. Mills and foundries sprang up in all parts, and in a few years the prosperity of the city attained its height. The house of Playfair remained faithful to the enterprising spirit of its ancestors. It entered into the most daring schemes and maintained the honor of English commerce. The principal, Vincent Playfair, a man of 50, with a temperament essentially practical and decided, although somewhat daring, was a genuine shipowner. Nothing affected him beyond commercial questions, not even the political side of the transactions. Otherwise, he was a perfectly loyal and honest man. However, he could not lay claim to the idea of building and fitting up the Dolphin. She belonged to his nephew, James Playfair, a fine young man of 30, the boldest skipper of the British merchant marine. It was one day at the Tontine coffee room, under the arcades of the town hall, that James Playfair, after having impatiently scanned the American journal, disclosed to his uncle an adventurous scheme.
"Uncle Vincent,"
said he, coming to the point at once,
"there are £2 millions to be gained in less than a month."
"And what's to risk?"
asked Uncle Vincent.
"A ship and a cargo."
"Nothing else?"
"Nothing, except the crew and the captain, and that does not reckon for much."
"Let us see,"
said Uncle Vincent.
"It is all seen,"
replied James Playfair.
"You have read the Tribune, the New York Herald, the Times, the Richmond Enquirer, the American Review?"
"Scores of times, nephew."
"You believe, like me, that the war of the United States will last a long time still?"
"A very long time."
"You know how much this struggle will affect the interests of England, and especially those of Glasgow?"
"And more especially still the house of Playfair and Co."
replied Uncle Vincent.
"Theirs especially,"
added the young captain.
"I worry myself about it every day, James, and I cannot think without terror of the commercial disasters which this war may produce. Not but the house of Playfair is firmly established, nephew, but at the same time it has correspondents which may fail. Those Americans, slaveholders or abolitionists, I have no faith in them."
If Vincent Playfair was wrong in thus speaking with respect to the great principles of humanity, always and everywhere superior to personal interests, he was nevertheless right from a commercial point of view. The most important material was failing at Glasgow. The cotton famine became every day more threatening. Thousands of workmen were reduced to living upon public charity. Glasgow possessed 25,000 looms, by which 625,000 yards of cotton were spun daily, that is to say, 50 millions of pounds yearly. From these numbers it may be guessed what disturbances were caused in the commercial part of the town when the raw material failed altogether. Failures were hourly taking place, the manufactories were closed, and the workmen were dying of starvation. It was the sight of this great misery which had put the idea of his bold enterprise into James Playfair's head.
"I will go for cotton, and will get it, cost what it may."
But, as he also was a merchant as well as his Uncle Vincent, he resolved to carry out his plan by way of exchange, and to make his proposition under the guise of a commercial enterprise.
"Uncle Vincent,"
said he,
"this is my idea.
"Well, James?"
It is simply this. We will have a ship built of superior sailing qualities and great bulk.
"That is quite possible."
We will load her with ammunition of war, provisions, and clothes.
"Just so."
I will take the command of this steamer. I will defy all the ships of the Federal Marine for speed, and I will run the blockade of one of the southern ports."
"You must make a good bargain for your cargo with the Confederates, who will be in need of it,"
said his uncle.
"And I shall return laden with cotton."
which they will give you for nothing.
As you say, uncle. Will it answer?
It will. But shall you be able to get there?
I shall, if I have a good ship.
One could be made on purpose. But the crew?
Oh, I will find them. I do not want many men. Enough to work with, that is all. It's not a question of fighting with the Federals, but distancing them.
They shall be distanced,
said Uncle Vincent in a peremptory tone.
But now, tell me, James, to what port of the American coast do you think of going?
Up to now, uncle, ships have run the blockades of New Orleans, Wilmington, and Savannah, but I think of going straight to Charleston. No English boat has yet been able to penetrate into the harbour, except the Bermuda. I will do like her, and if my ship draws but very little water, I shall be able to go where the Federalists will not be able to follow.
The fact is,
said Uncle Vincent,
Charleston is overwhelmed with cotton. They're even burning it to get rid of it.
Yes,
replied James.
Besides, the town is almost invested. Beauregard is running short of provisions, and he will pay me a golden price for my cargo.
Well, nephew, and when will you start?
In 6 months. I must have the long winter nights to aid me.
It shall be as you wish, nephew.
It is settled then, uncle.
Settled.
Shall it be kept quiet?
Yes, better so.
And this is how it was that 5 months later the steamer Dolphin was launched from the Kelvin Dock timber yards, and no one knew her real destination. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2 of The Blockade Runners by Jules Verne. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 2. Getting Under Sail. The Dolphin was rapidly equipped, her rigging was ready, and there was nothing to do but fit her up. She carried 3 schooner masts, an almost useless luxury. In fact, the Dolphin did not have to rely on the wind to escape the Federalists, but rather on her powerful engines. Towards the end of December a trial of the steamer was made in the Gulf of the Clyde. Which was the more satisfied, builder or captain, it is impossible to say. The new steamer shot along wonderfully, and the patent log showed a speed of 17 miles an hour, a speed which, as yet, no English, French, or American boat had ever obtained. The Dolphin would certainly have gained by several lengths in a sailing match with the fastest opponent. The loading was begun on the 25th of December, the steamer having ranged along the steamboat quay a little below Glasgow Bridge, the last which stretches across the Clyde before its mouth. Here the wharfs were heaped with a heavy cargo of clothes, ammunition, and provisions, which were rapidly carried to the hold of the Dolphin. The nature of this cargo betrayed the mysterious destination of the ship, and the house of Playfair could no longer keep it secret. Besides, the Dolphin must not be long before she started. No American cruiser had been signaled in English waters, and then, when the question of getting the crew came, how was it possible to keep silent any longer? They could not embark them, even, without informing the men whither they were bound, for, after all, it was a matter of life and death. And when one risks one's life, at least it is satisfactory to know how and wherefore. However, this prospect hindered no one. The pay was good, and everyone had a share in the speculation, so that a great number of the finest sailors soon presented themselves. James Playfair was only embarrassed which to choose, but he chose well, and in 24 hours his muster roll bore the names of 30 sailors who would have done honor to Her Majesty's yacht. The departure was settled for the 3rd of January. On the 31st of December the Dolphin was ready, her hold full of ammunition and provisions, and nothing was keeping her now. The skipper went on board on the 2nd of January, and was giving a last look round his ship with the captain's eye, when a man presented himself at the forepart of the Dolphin, and asked to speak with the captain. One of the sailors led him on to the poop. He was a strong, hearty-looking fellow, with broad shoulders and ruddy face, the simple expression of which ill-concealed a depth of wit and mirth. He did not seem to be accustomed to a seafaring life, and looked about him with the air of a man little used to being on board a ship. However, he assumed the manner of a jack-tar, looking up at the rigging of the Dolphin and waddling in true sailor fashion. When he had reached the captain, he looked fixedly at him and said,
"Captain James Playfair?"
The same,
replied the skipper.
What you want with me?
"To join your ship."
There is no room. The crew is already complete.
"Oh, one man more or less will not be in the way. Quite the contrary."
You think so?
Said James Playfair, giving a sidelong glance at his questioner.
"I am sure of it,"
replied the sailor.
But who are you?
Asked the captain.
"A rough sailor with 2 strong arms, which, I can tell you, are not to be despised on board a ship, and which I now have the honor of putting at your service."
But there are other ships besides the Dolphin, and other captains besides James Playfair. Why'd you come here?
"Because it is on board the Dolphin that I wish to serve, and under the orders of Captain James Playfair."
I do not want you.
"There is always need of a strong man, and if to prove my strength you will try me with 3 or 4 of the strongest fellows of your crew, I am ready."
That will do.
Replied James Playfair.
And what is your name?
"Croxton, at your service."
The captain made a few steps backwards in order to get a better view of the giant who presented himself in this odd fashion. The height, the build, and the look of the sailor did not deny his pretensions to strength.
Where have you sailed?
Asked Playfair of him.
"A little everywhere."
And you know where the Dolphin is bound for?
"Yes, and that is what tempts me."
Ah, well, I have no mind to let a fellow of your stamp escape me. Go and find the first mate and get him to enroll you.
Having said this, the captain expected to see the man turn on his heels and run to the bows, but he was mistaken. Croxton did not stir.
Well, did you hear me?
Asked the captain.
"Yes, but it is not all,"
replied the sailor.
"I have something else to ask you."
Ah, you're wasting my time,
replied James sharply.
I have not a moment to lose in talking.
"I shall not keep you long,"
replied Croxton.
2 words more, and that is all. I was going to tell you that I have a nephew."
He has a fine uncle, then.
Interrupted James Playfair.
"Ha ha!"
Laughed Croxton.
Have you finished?
Asked the captain, very impatiently.
"Well, this is what I have to say. When one takes the uncle, the nephew comes into the bargain."
Ah, indeed.
"Yes, that is the custom. The one does not go without the other."
And what is this nephew of yours?
"A lad of 15 whom I am going to train to the sea. He is willing to learn and will make a fine sailor some day."
How now, Mr. Croxton?
Cried James Playfair.
Do you think the Dolphin is a training school for cabin boys?
"Do not speak ill of cabin boys. There was one of them who became Admiral Nelson and another Admiral Franklin."
Upon my honour, friend,
replied James Playfair.
you have a way of speaking which I like. Bring your nephew, but if I don't find the uncle the hearty fellow he pretends to be, he'll have some business with me. Go, and be back in an hour.
Croxton did not want to be told twice. He bowed awkwardly to the captain of the Dolphin and went on to the quay. An hour afterwards he came on board with his nephew, a boy of 14 or 15, rather delicate and weakly looking, with a timid and astonished air, which showed that he did not possess his uncle's self-possession and vigorous corporeal qualities. Croxton was even obliged to encourage him by such words as these.
"Come,"
said he.
"Don't be frightened. They are not going to eat us. Besides, there is yet time to return."
"No, no,"
replied the young man.
"and may God protect us."
The same day the sailor Croxton and his nephew were inscribed in the muster roll of the Dolphin. The next morning, at 5 o'clock, the fires of the steamer were well fed, the deck trembled under the vibrations of the boiler, and the steam rushed hissing through the escape pipes. The hour of departure had arrived. A considerable crowd, in spite of the early hour, flocked on the quays and on Glasgow Bridge. They had come to salute the bold steamer for the last time. Vincent Playfair was there to say good-bye to Captain James, but he conducted himself on this occasion like a Roman of the good old times. His was a heroic countenance, and the 2 loud kisses with which he gratified his nephew were the indication of a strong mind.
"Go, James,"
said he to the young captain.
"Go quickly, and come back quicker still. Above all, don't abuse your position. Sell at a good price, make a good bargain, and you will have your uncle's esteem."
On this recommendation, borrowed from the manual of the perfect merchant, the uncle and nephew separated, and all the visitors left the boat. At this moment Croxton and John Stiggs stood together on the forecastle, while the former remarked to his nephew,
This is well, this is well. Before 2 o'clock we shall be at sea, and I have a good opinion of a voyage which begins like this.
For reply the novice pressed Croxton's hand. James Playfair then gave the orders for departure.
Have we pressure on?
He asked of his mate.
"Yes, Captain,"
replied Mr. Matthew.
Well then, weigh anchor.
This was immediately done, and the screws began to move. The Dolphin trembled, passed between the ships in the port, and soon disappeared from the sight of the people, who shouted their last hurrahs. The descent of the Clyde was easily accomplished. One might almost say that this river had been made by the hand of man, and even by the hand of a master. For 60 years, thanks to the dredges and constant dragging, it has gained 15 feet in depth, and its breadth has been tripled between the quays and the town. Soon the forests of masts and chimneys were lost in the smoke and fog. The noise of the foundry hammers and the hatchets of the timber yards grew fainter in the distance. After the village of Partick had been passed, the factories gave way to country houses and villas. The Dolphin, slackening her speed, sailed between the dikes which carry the river above the shores, and often through a very narrow channel, which, however, is only a small inconvenience for a navigable river, for, after all, depth is of more importance than width. The steamer, guided by one of those excellent pilots from the Irish Sea, passed without hesitation between floating buoys, stone columns, and biggings surmounted with lighthouses, which marked the entrance to the channel. Beyond the town of Renfrew, at the foot of Kilpatrick Hills, the Clyde grew wider. Then came Boiling Bay, at the end of which opens the mouth of the canal which joins Edinburgh to Glasgow. Lastly, at the height of 400 feet from the ground, was seen the outline of Dumbarton Castle, almost indiscernible through the mists, and soon the harbour boats of Glasgow were rocked on the waves which the Dolphin caused. Some miles farther on, Greenock, the birthplace of James Watt, was passed. The Dolphin now found herself at the mouth of the Clyde, and at the entrance of the gulf by which it empties its waters into the Northern Ocean. Here the first undulations of the sea were felt, and the steamer ranged along the picturesque coast of the Isle of Arran. At last the promontory of Cantyre, which runs out into the channel, was doubled. The Isle of Rathlin was hailed. The pilot returned by a shore-boat to his cutter, which was cruising in the open sea. The Dolphin, returning to her captain's authority, took a less frequented route round the north of Ireland, and soon, having lost sight of the last European land, found herself in the open ocean. End of chapter 2. Chapter 3 of The Blockade Runners by Jules Verne. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 3. Things are not what they seem. The Dolphin had a good crew, not fighting men or boarding sailors, but good working men, and that was all she wanted. These brave, determined fellows were all more or less merchants. They sought a fortune rather than glory. They had no flag to display, no colours to defend with cannon. In fact, all the artillery on board consisted of 2 small swivel signal guns. The Dolphin shot bravely across the water, and fulfilled the utmost expectations of both builder and captain. Soon she passed the limit of British seas. There was not a ship in sight. The great ocean route was free. Besides, No ship of the Federal Marine would have a right to attack her beneath the English flag. Followed she might be, and prevented from forcing the blockade, and precisely for this reason had James Playfair sacrificed everything to the speed of his ship, in order not to be pursued. Howbeit, a careful watch was kept on board, and, in spite of the extreme cold, a man was always in the rigging ready to signal the smallest sail that appeared on the horizon. When evening came, Captain James gave the most precise orders to Mr. Matthew.
Don't leave the man on watch too long in the rigging. The cold may seize him, and in that case it's impossible to keep a good lookout. Change your men often.
I understand, Captain,
replied Mr. Matthew.
Try Croxton for that work. The fellow pretends to have excellent sight. He must be put to trial. Put him on the morning watch. He'll have the morning mist to see through. If anything particular happens, call me.
This said, James Playfair went to his cabin. Mr. Matthew called Croxton and told him the captain's orders.
Tomorrow at 6 o'clock,
said he,
you are to relieve watch of the main masthead.
For reply, Croxton gave a decided grunt.
Huh.
But Mr. Matthew had hardly turned his back when the sailor muttered some incomprehensible words and then cried,
What on earth did he say about the mainmast?
At this moment his nephew, John Stiggs, joined him on the forecastle.
Well, my good Croxton,
said he.
It's all right,
said the seaman with a forced smile.
There is only one thing. This wretched boat shakes herself like a dog coming out of the water, and it makes my head confused.
Dear Croxton, and it is for my sake.
For you and him,
replied Croxton.
But not a word about that, John. Trust in God, and he will not forsake you.
So saying, John Stiggs and Croxton went to the sailor's berth. But the sailor did not lie down before he had seen the young novice comfortably settled in the narrow cabin which he had got for him. The next day, at 6 o'clock in the morning, Croxton got up to go to his place. He went on deck, where the first officer ordered him to go up into the rigging and keep good watch. At these words the sailor seemed undecided what to do. Then, making up his mind, he went towards the bows of the Dolphin.
Well, where are you off to now?
cried Mr. Matthew.
Where you sent me,
answered Croxton.
I told you to go to the mainmast.
And I am going there,
replied the sailor in an unconcerned tone, continuing his way to the poop.
Are you a fool?
cried Mr. Matthew impatiently.
You are looking for the bars of the main on the foremast. You are like a cockney who doesn't know how to twist a cat-o'-nine-tails or make a splice. On board what ship can you have been, man? The mainmast, stupid, the mainmast.
The sailors, who had run up to hear what was going on, burst out laughing when they saw Croxton's disconcerted look as he went back to the forecastle.
So,
said he, looking up the mast, the top of which was quite invisible through the morning mists.
So, am I to climb up here?
Yes,
replied Mr. Matthew.
And hurry yourself. By St. Patrick, a Federal ship would have time to get her bowsprit fast in our rigging before that lazy fellow could get to his post. Will you go up?
Without a word, Croxton got on the bulwarks with some difficulty. Then he began to climb the rigging with most visible awkwardness, like a man who did not know how to make use of his hands or feet. When he had reached the topgallant, instead of springing lightly on to it, he remained motionless, clinging to the ropes, as if he had been seized with giddiness. Mr. Matthew, irritated by his stupidity, ordered him to come down immediately.
That fellow there,
said he to the boatswain,
has never been a sailor in his life. Johnston, just go and see what he has in his bundle.
The boatswain made haste to the sailor's berth. In the meantime, Croxton was, with difficulty, coming down again. But, his foot having slipped, he slid down the rope he had hold of and fell heavily on the deck.
Clumsy blockhead! Landlubber!
cried Mr. Matthew by way of consolation.
What did you come to do on board the Dolphin? Ha! You entered as an able seaman, and you cannot even distinguish the main from the foremast. I shall have a little talk with you.
Croxton made no attempt to speak. He bent his back like a man resigned to anything he might have to bear. Just then the boatswain returned.
"This,"
said he to the first officer,
"is all that I have found. A suspicious portfolio with letters."
"Give them here,"
said Mr. Matthew.
"Letters with federal stamps. Mr. Halliburt of Boston, an abolitionist, a Federalist? Wretch, you are nothing but a traitor, and have sneaked on board to betray us. Never mind, you'll be paid for your trouble with the cat o' nine tails. Boatswain, call the captain, and you others just keep an eye on that rogue there."
Crockston received these compliments with a hideous grimace, but he did not open his lips. They had fastened him to the capstan, and he could move neither hand nor foot. A few minutes later James Playfair came out of his cabin and went to the forecastle, where Mr. Matthew immediately acquainted him with the details of the case.
"What have ye to say?"
asked James Playfair, scarcely able to restrain his anger.
Nothing.
Replied Crockston.
"And what did ye come on board my ship for?"
Nothing.
"And what do you expect from me now?"
Nothing.
"Who are you? An American, as the letters seem to prove?"
Crockston did not answer.
"Boatswain,"
said James Playfair,
50 lashes with a cat o' nine tails to loosen his tongue. Will that be enough, Crockston?"
It will remain to be seen,"
replied John Stiggs' uncle without moving a muscle.
"Now then, come along, men,"
said the boatswain. At this order 2 strong sailors stripped Crockston of his woolen jersey. They had already seized the formidable weapon and laid it across the prisoner's shoulders when the novice, John Stiggs, pale and agitated, hurried on deck.
"Captain!"
exclaimed he.
"Ah, the nephew,"
remarked James Playfair.
"Captain!"
repeated the novice with a violent effort to steady his voice.
"I will tell you what Crockston does not want to say. I will hide it no longer. Yes, he is an American, and so am I. We are both enemies of the slaveholders, but not traitors come on board to betray the Dolphin into the hands of the Federalists."
"What did ye come to do then?"
asked the captain in a severe tone, examining the novice attentively. The latter hesitated a few seconds before replying. Then he said,
"Captain, I should like to speak to you in private."
Whilst John Stiggs made this request, James Playfair did not cease to look carefully at him. The sweet young face of the novice, his peculiarly gentle voice, the delicacy and whiteness of his hands, hardly disguised by paint, the large eyes, the animation of which could not bide their tenderness, all this together gave rise to a certain suspicion in the captain's mind. When John Stiggs had made his request, Playfair glanced fixedly at Crockston, who shrugged his shoulders. Then he fastened a questioning look on the novice, which the latter could not withstand, and said simply to him,
"Come."
John Stiggs followed the captain on to the poop, and then James Playfair, opening the door of his cabin, said to the novice, whose cheeks were pale with emotion,
"Be so kind as to walk in, miss."
John, thus addressed, blushed violently, and 2 tears rolled involuntarily down his cheeks.
"Don't be alarmed, miss,"
said James Playfair in a gentle voice,
"but be so good as to tell me how I come to have the pleasure of having you on board."
The young girl hesitated a moment, then, reassured by the captain's look, she made up her mind to speak.
"Sir,"
said she,
"I wanted to join my father at Charleston. The town is besieged by land and blockaded by sea. I knew not how to get there when I heard that the Dolphin meant to force the blockade. I came on board your ship, and I beg you to forgive me if I acted without your consent, which you would have refused me."
"Certainly,"
said James Playfair.
"I did well then not to ask you,"
resumed the young girl with a firmer voice. The captain crossed his arms, walked round his cabin, and then came back.
"What is your name?"
said he.
"Jenny Halliburt."
"Your father, if I remember rightly the address on the letters, is he not from Boston?"
"Yes, sir."
"And a northerner is thus in a southern town in the thickest of the war?"
"My father is a prisoner. He was at Charleston when the first shot of the Civil War was fired and the troops of the Union driven from Fort Sumter by the Confederates. My father's opinions exposed him to the hatred of the slavist part, and by the order of General Beauregard, he was imprisoned. I was then in England, living with a relation who had just died, and left alone, with no help but that of Croxton, our faithful servant. I wished to go to my father and share his prison with him.
What was Mr. Halliburt, then?
asked James Playfair.
A loyal and brave journalist,
replied Jenny proudly.
One of the noblest editors of the Tribune, and the one who was the boldest in defending the cause of the Negroes.
An abolitionist,
cried the captain angrily.
One of those men who, under the vain pretense of abolishing slavery, have deluged their country with blood and ruin.
Sir,
replied Jenny Halliburt, growing pale.
You are insulting my father. You must not forget that I stand alone to defend him.
The young captain blushed scarlet. Anger, mingled with shame, struggled in his breast. Perhaps he would have answered the young girl, but he succeeded in restraining himself, and, opening the door of the cabin, he called,
"Boatswain!"
The boatswain came to him directly.
"This cabin will henceforward belong to Miss Jenny Halliburt. Have a cot made ready for me at the end of the poop. That's all I want."
The boatswain looked with a stupefied stare at the young novice addressed in a feminine name, but on a sign from James Playfair he went out.
"And now, miss, you're at home,"
said the young captain of the Dolphin. Then he retired. End of chapter 3.